Were you disappointed that they turned the Obi Wan movie into a series? Well, we have a new reverse card here that might be very exciting. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. There's a new report going on that has been around since July, and this report could change everything we know about for the Star Wars future. And I'm not actually exaggerating when I say that, because Disney has wanted a Star Wars movie in theaters for quite some time. Ever since Bob Iger has returned to Disney, he is on a rampage to get something Star Wars back into the spotlight and to bring people into theaters. And I think that's fair. If you look at it from a business perspective, they don't make any money off of the TV series directly, really, because you can't really identify if someone subscribes to Disney Plus for one particular thing, or you can't really do it easily. And we as audience members, we can't actually see any of those numbers. And it's also indicative because they lost $1 billion last year. One of the big reasons is because of Disney Plus. So if we put all these things together, obviously they're going to want to bring something to the theaters to bring them back, and it's definitely time. By the time this movie, whatever it ends up being, comes out, 2026, it has been 7 years since the last Star Wars movie. And that's honestly about consistent with the big eras of Star Wars. If we look at the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy, that's about the distance of time that it takes for these big moments. And I think that's where Star Wars really thrives. But what the heck am I going on this history rant for? Well, in Star Wars recently, we've had a variety of news. This movie got announced, this movie got canceled, this movie got announced, this movie got canceled. This movie is still happening, but the writer is different, the director stays the same. Also, this movie that we canceled, it's actually alive, but now it's these other two people that are directing it. So there's a lot of things going on. But as we see more rumors around something like Lando, which was originally intended to be a series turned into a movie, we have another one to add to that list, and that is Mandalorian Season 4. But first, let's talk about Mandalorian Season 3, because I think that's where things could get interesting if we look at it from the wider variety of Star Wars in the current day and age. Mandalorian Season 3 was definitely a departure from the first two seasons. Season 1 and Season 2 were following more of the typical idea that George Lucas started with, wanting to replicate what he grew up with Flash Gordon and having these one-off stories that are set in this almost like science fantasy world. And if you look at The Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2, Season 1 in particular was very much a almost task of the week kind of show. It brought this idea that, hey, we have a character, we do have an overarching goal, but each episode's going to follow these side missions as they eventually get to their end goal. And Season 2 continued that trope with having the standard Star Wars experience in television right now, which is, oh my gosh, you're going to this one place, your ship crashes, you have to use the materials within this one planet to fix your ship and then go back. I mean, technically they did that twice if you count the first season with the Jawas. And if you look at this idea and then you go to Season 3, you have this identity crisis. You have Mandalorian Season 3 wanting to be that standard, almost separate stories that end up at the location that's overarching through the whole season. So you have that idea, but you also have the introduction of many side characters. You have many tangents, and you have this push to make the galaxy larger, almost more of like an Avengers-esque situation where you have the inspiration of bringing these groups together, saving Mandalore, but also not giving them enough time to properly do that. So I feel like The Mandalorian struggled to put too many things into a very simple show. Mandalorian, when it comes down to it, is a series of side quests that ultimately get him further down his ultimate journey, which originally was to save Grogu, take him to where he needs to go, and then the second season, getting him to where he needs to go. And then in Book of Boba Fett, that obviously gets taken back. He gets reunited with Grogu, and they have that little side arc. And then season 3 was like, well, what now? Let's expand this idea of the Mandalorian being a moniker. It stands for more than just Din Djarin. It stands for Bo-Katan, as well as her group. And then the original Children of the Watch, it also stands for those people. And let's just bring everything back to where we started with season 1 and not take any big steps to the characters or any character development. Because if you look at it, nothing really happens. Everything that happened in the Book of Boba Fett gets reverted, and everything that happened in season 2 also gets reverted. So there's not real progression in these characters and their overarching journey. And I think that actually lends itself to a great situation for season 4. Or, as this rumor is saying, season 4 is going to turn into a movie, and we're not going to get the Daisy Ridley continuation of the Jedi Order and the rebuilding of that order. That's actually going to be the next movie. The first movie that we're going to get is the Mandalorian movie, and I think there are some positives here that I want to get into, and then obviously we'll talk about some of the downsides that could implement. But first, why is this going to work? As Disney is going further into the TV space, they are learning a lot. If you look at the Marvel stuff, they made a lot of mistakes, and they just took the idea for a movie and stretched it out. And I think they've done better with Star Wars, of course, but if you look at the biggest transgressor of this, which is the Obi Wan show, they took a movie, they stretched it out to 26 episodes, and then they condensed it down to 12 episodes, and then they condensed it down to 6 episodes, and there wasn't a whole lot to work with there. Because when you take what was originally supposed to be a 2.5-hour movie and you stretch it out to upwards of 45-minute episodes, maybe, it's just going to feel long. And I think that carried over a lot to what we eventually got with that mini-series. So why do I think that this is a good idea to go in reverse? Well, it's a lot easier to condense something down to its original idea and make it good than it is to take an idea and make it long. It's much better if you make something condensed. There's the whole quote from Mark Twain, or at least it's attributed to Mark Twain, where he says, "I would have written you a shorter letter if I had the time," meaning that you can slim things down if you give it more time. And I think that would actually benefit from a story where you almost have, instead of having multiple one-off missions that ultimately carry over and come to this one story, you can just have the movie be this one mission that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and keep that pacing really tight. And you don't have the fluff that season 3 would have had, because season 3, yes, there's moments that I really enjoy, but for the most part, it just felt very lost and meandering. And I think if it was limited to only 2.5 hours, it would have been a lot tighter and a lot more interesting. So that's where I think the benefit is going to be if they go this direction. Now, the downside is that it just ends up being a little bit bland, because most people's experiences with The Mandalorian is season 1 and season 2. A lot of people didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, and then a lot of people didn't watch Mandalorian as well. So they're in this different spot where they have to do a lot of catching people up, because if you do a movie based on a TV show, you need to go in with the assumption that not everyone has watched the TV show. And I don't know how well they are prepared for this, because if you look at Ahsoka, I think they did a pretty good job with making it Rebels agnostic, but there was still a lot there that you kind of had to go into with a history of knowing what the heck happened before. So that's my thoughts. I think it's going to be interesting if it's done well, and I think it has a higher likelihood of being done well than a TV series, because the TV has an opportunity for them to go a little bit long, get off on some side tangents, which they don't have the opportunity to do in a movie because you were only limited to 2.5 hours. But let me know your thoughts on what I've discussed here. Are you excited that it could possibly be a movie, or are you wanting it to stay on the small screen? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, check out our podcast, and may the Force be with you.